Hugo, a very good evening to you. Thank you for joining me. I can't get my head around this absolute unmitigated disaster that the government seem to sort of shrug their shoulders at and look after the shareholders rather than the people of this country.
Well, thanks for having me on, Petrie. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said water is fundamental to life. We don't get to opt out of this product. We all rely on it for so many different reasons, but most importantly, to keep us alive. And government has, to a certain extent, washed its hands of this problem. It's tried to kick it down the road. And with this review, you're seeing yet another attempt to try and kick it down the road, to try and placate the public by saying, look, we're doing all this sort of radical reform, but they're not addressing the fundamental issue of who owns our water. Because that review, the Concliffe review, was blocked from even looking into that as a question or suggesting public ownership as a solution, even though that's how 9 out of 10 countries run their water.
Look, before we get on to that question, and I will ask you about that, why has this gone so wrong? Why is it that Thames Water, one of the biggest, I think it is the biggest water supplier in this country, has been allowed to behave, frankly, like a set of gangsters? They've been allowed to use this water company as a cash cow. They've managed to get into the most appalling amount of debt. They don't care about their customers, and any fine or any misgiving or any failure on their part has simply been passed on to us. What's the point in fining them? What's the point in any of it if they just go, oh, well, the customers will just have to pay it?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, you asked the question, how have we got here?
Yeah.
I mean, how long have you got? I think we can start with Maggie Thatcher in 1989. That's when we sold off we sold off the family silver, and it wasn't that we were just sort of letting companies operate on the system, if you like. We actually sold the assets, the whole network, everything, full kit and caboodle. And now, effectively, what the British people is doing is renting it back.
Yeah.
Often foreign-owned billionaires and hedge funds. Sometimes even foreign states that have ownership of these water companies. So that already sets the scene. And then what you've had is decades and decades of mismanagement from a government and from a regulator perspective. It's been far too light touch. There's been a revolving door culture with regulators and the water companies. And I'm afraid to say that, still now, even with a Labour government, that you might think would start to do some radical things, including taking back control of our water, unfortunately, they're falling into the same trap. And, Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, we highlighted back in last summer, he'd been wined and dined by water companies. He'd been taken out to the football and had, nearly £2,000 worth of football hospitality at his beloved Crystal Palace. So you do have to worry, are these politicians getting lobbied by the water companies and they're in their ear, and not the public who, 82% of us want water in public ownership, because the public are smart enough to know that that's the only way that you can start to claw back this situation that, as you say, is completely out of control.
I mean, you look at Ofwat, which I think should be dissolved. I don't care if it's in water or in something else, but I mean, Ofwat has been a paper tiger. They've done nothing, and even to the point where they've had to get an external commission to write a report on the water industry when it should have been their job to do that. So, like as you were saying, the regulators have been weak. The government has been worse than weak, and we're left swimming in oceans that are filthy, looking at rivers rivers that are so toxic and polluted, and even, you know, water supplies around the country are, you know, are sometimes dangerous, sometimes not there, and then we've got a situation where it's costing certainly Thames Water's customers an extra 35% to pay for Thames Water not doing anything with the money that they had swimming around in their casino.
Yeah, and when you look at Thames Water, I mean, really, this has got to be the poster child
Yeah.
for the failed privatization experiment. How it's managed to limp on this long is, you know, remarkable, really. And if you just turn the clock back just to February this year, when their bailout deal, their £3 billion bailout deal, was approved by the High Court, which, you know, the government did nothing to step in and stop that happening and say, look, we're going to put you in special administration. We're going to, you know, slash a load of this rotten debt, you know, and I would suggest what they would need to do then is take it into full public ownership and start building a proper plan for investment. But at that point, I mean, I was outside the High Court. Lots of other water campaigners were outside the High Court, and we predicted this situation. And now today we hear that KKR, the preferred bidder for Thames Water, is backing out, citing a worry about political interference. Now that tells you all you need to know. They want the politicians to leave them well alone, to get on and make their billions without any interference. And the problem is, with that 3 billion loan that went through, that 3 billion finance package, 800 million of that 3 billion went straight out the door in financial fees, in legal fees, in cost of finance, in interest payments. Didn't do anything to solve the sewage crisis, didn't do anything to bring down bills, didn't do anything to fix the 3 billion litres of water that are leaking out of pipes, you know, that are ailing infrastructure every day. So even just in this microcosm of Thames Water, you see the whole picture illuminated of all of the failures. And really, it's time that the government did something about this. They've been sitting on their hands, they've been kicking it down the can. And the worst thing is, they have that power. Steve Reed has the power of special administration. That was the power that was used when they brought rail track into Network Rail. And turned that around. It was the same powers that Steve Reed has now. He can step in with Thames Water, with failing water companies, and there's a few that are going to fall if Thames Water falls. There's a few in line. He can step in, as I say, slash a load of that debt, because that's what the public's worried about. Can we afford public ownership? Well, yes, with special administration, you get rid of a load of that debt. It's a bad investment. It should be shown to be a bad investment. And then you need to take it into public ownership and build a plan for investment and for bringing people's bills down. But you have to be bold as a government. And at the moment, this government is not showing that bold leadership. You know, they're willing to continue to let us rent our water back at ever increasing prices and at an ever increasing cost to the climate.
The issue with, I mean, look, they may not have a choice. Right? The government may not have a choice, because if Thames Water can't get another backer, the government is going to have to step into special administration, which is in its own regard a kind of taking it back into public ownership.
And this is what we've been saying for some time, Petrie, that the government will eventually have to do this.
Yeah.
There's an underlying reality that cannot be ignored. And so much better to do it early on with a proper plan in a staged way than try and pick up the pieces when you've already thrown good money after bad in terms of that 800 million that went straight out the door, you know, and all the other money that's being spent. You come in and you put together a proper plan. And they should have done this months and months ago. This should have been job number one on Steve Reed's desk when he came in as Environment Secretary when they won that general election, because, you know, everyone knows the problems. And the astonishing thing is that almost everyone agrees on the solution. Yeah. You know, I mention it again, 82% of the British public want water in public ownership. They're not dumb. They understand that this can't go on. And the fundamental underlying business proposition is flawed, because what the water companies have done is effectively get into a situation where they've managed to create a state-sanctioned Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
What they've done since 1989 is racked up over 60 billion of debt, and at the same time they've used that debt to pay out over 85 billion in salaries and dividend payments. So just looking at those two numbers, you can see what's happened.
Shocking.
They've taken a national asset and they've loaded it up with debt to enrich themselves. That's the story right there. And all of the other effects around sewage pollution, around, lack of investment in infrastructure, that's all a byproduct of that fundamental business proposition or opportunity that they saw. I mean, you must have been rubbing your hands together as one of those people getting hold of our water industry, saying, hang on, there's zero market here.
Yeah, there's
Our
no
customers
competition.
are completely captive.
Yeah.
They will never leave. So we can do what we like. We can put bills up. They won't have a choice. We can spew sewage into the river. They won't have a choice. We'll just load the bills up more, like you say. It doesn't make any sense to privatize a natural monopoly like water.
It also has baffled me, to be honest, Hugo, that there isn't a law against using debt to pay dividends. It has always been a situation. I worked in the stock markets as a reporter, right, as a presenter, reporter on the stock market world, and the idea that debt is treated as a profit, which is where dividends are supposed to come from, is absolutely should be a criminal act in my view, because it's not. It doesn't belong to them.
Well, yeah, if you'll forgive the digression, before I did this, I actually ran a small manufacturing company myself. Right. It was a family business, small scale, nowhere near the scale of these companies, it must be said. But as I sort of grew up in that business, I thought, the rule is you make money and you make a profit and you do all the things to make a successful, sustainable business, and then you can pay yourself some dividends, but only then.
Only then. I think it is illegal in small companies to pay yourself out of debt.
Exactly, but it feels like there's a different rule for these huge companies where actually you can buy the company as well on credit effectively. A lot of these companies are bought with huge loans and over leveraged finance, and then continue to load them up with debt. It's this sort of perverse situation where, all of the things that you would measure as success in an ordinary company, like, are you satisfying your customers? Are you delivering a good product? Are they happy with the service? All of these things that should be a marker of success don't matter. And really, it's just about enriching yourself as owners and as CEOs. And I think that's the thing that really sticks in the core for the British public. It doesn't seem like it's a level playing field or fair. Everyone's at the point now where it's just a case of, can we just get on with it? Can we just get on with it? Can we bring it into public ownership? Because, privatization has failed.